All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Word with Ty Brownlow. I am your host, Ty Brownlow, and remember, no one is worthless. No story is worthless. And today, ladies and gentlemen, I have a very special guest for you. Give you a couple of words about my guest. Advocate, encouraging, mentor, positivity. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Anthony Winston II.
Oh, thank you very much. Third.
I'm sorry, the third. I'm sorry.
That's all good.
I said the second. I'm sorry. Mr. Anthony Winston III, everybody. Put your hands together for him. All right.
Appreciate you.
No problem, brother. No problem. Now, you are here, and we're here to talk about ownership and entrepreneurship, because those are some of the things that you pretty much are in, and those are pretty much some of the things that you've mastered and you've shared on to others. One of the first questions I want to ask you is, what drives your desire to give back, especially to those who are not even in your field?
I think it's super important that we as Black folks, when we're going through things and we're achieving certain things, it's always a good idea to bring other folks with you, right? The goal is to make the path for the next person coming behind you that much smoother, right? So that they can get there quicker and more efficient, to avoid especially a lot of the pitfalls, because comparatively we start 50 yards behind the starting line when it comes to anything you can think of, whether it's education, whether it's home ownership, whether it's your wealth, all that good stuff. So that's my goal. And then two, being an engineer, most people don't choose that career path. Right. So, and then specifically, I'm in power, which a lot of people in engineering don't go into. And then go even more granular, I'm in construction, so it's even less people in it. So you look at it that way, and it's a lot less people that look like us. So I get a lot of folks who hit me up on Instagram or LinkedIn and say, hey, I like what you're doing, I appreciate it, I want to try to do that. So it's always my goal to pass along as much knowledge as I possibly can, and I've done that in a few blogs that I've written, just to kind of leave those breadcrumbs out there so that people can follow and get go down their own path. So when somebody hits me up, I'll copy and paste that or my blog and say, here, start here, and then come back with any specific questions that you have, and then we go down that path.
All right, now I'm going to say we're going to talk about some of these articles that you've written in a minute, but we're going to get through the rest of these questions. But we're going to talk about some of these articles because I was reading through, two other articles of how I escaped my 9 to 5 and, the crust 5 years in, business. And, just in reading those and some of the points that you hit on, I really don't think, we sometimes really take time out to think about those things. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. Now, I want to talk about something I find very interesting, and we can talk about this. Let's, expand on this a little bit, but I want to talk about return on investment, especially when it comes to kids going to college. Now, reading, like I said, reading some of the things that you were talking about, well, first and foremost, I'm gonna start with, what is a return on investment for kids going to college in your eyes?
So what's happening now is a lot of kids are going to college, getting these degrees, and they're getting themselves in a whole lot of debt, right? So in my mind, it doesn't make sense for a kid to go to a college, rack up $50,000 to $100,000 in student loan debt, and you're majoring in some kind of general, and no shade on anybody who does it, and you're majoring in a general business degree, right? Mm-hmm. That you come out maybe making $40,000, $50,000 a year. When you factor in your living expenses and things like that, it's going to take you a really long time to pay that off. And to me, that's a bad investment, where something is going to take that long to pay off, and you get really no benefit from it. Maybe, potentially writing off some of the student loan debt. But I always tell kids, hey, if you want to go to college, let's talk about what you're going to major in. If you're going to do engineering like myself, if you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, or something that's more specialized where you need that, you absolutely need to go to college to do it, and you're going to come out of school making 60, 70, 80, $100,000 a year, then it makes sense. But if you come to me and say, I want to be a business owner, well, before I started my company, I had zero business experience. I didn't take any business classes in college. I just Googled, how do you start a business? And there's tons of free information out there. I mean, the federal government has quite a few programs where you can get a mentor that's, this particular person may have been in business or in the business realm for over 20 something years. And now you can get that, you can soak up that free information. And then two, not everybody's cut out for college. To be quite honest, if I would have known what I know now, I may have chosen a different path. I'm not complaining, we do pretty well for ourselves, but there are other options. And in my mind as a kid, I thought I had to go to college to be successful.
Okay. So I'm glad. There you go. I'm so glad you said that. Especially that last part, because, I think sometimes, especially in the African American community, we have built ourselves up on this, belief that, hey, you know what, man, I go to college, man, I'm gonna get a good job, I'm gonna, have this type of life, everything's gonna be good as long as I, go down this path. And as you said, there's been instances, and I know and I know, and there's people, my followers out here know as well. You have seen people go through 3.5 years of college under one program. The semester, this is a semester they're about to graduate. But it comes to the realization that, you know what? I don't see a future in that. I want to go into something else. So now you've already spent 3.5 years building your way up to, go through one door when you really realize that's not the door you want to go through. And because of most of the time, people, I'm going to say it, y'all may be mad at me, pressure from family members or others around us who may not have achieved, any further or what have you, who believe that it's the best way to go about doing things. And, it's no shade to them. Just in their mind, they were told that's the way to get it. So they're going to instill into you that that's the way you should get it. But we live in a day and age, you and I both know, and I try to tell kids this as well, like I work with middle school and high school youth or what have you, and I've been saying this for the last, I'm going to say maybe 8 years. Some of you don't need to go to college if you learn how to make an app. You'll never have to go to college. You won't even need it. If you already know what type of app you want to make, or there are certain things out here that you can do right now that you make, certain basic coding, certain basic things you can just learn. You don't need to spend 4 years racking up X, Y, and Z, amount of money to go into a field that you're not going to be satisfied in, to wake up one day and be like, I want to do something else with my life.
Yeah.
So return on investment, I think that's, as soon as I seen it, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, let's talk about that, because that's something that I feel, we really do need to talk about, because, I'm just going to say this and then I'm going to, move on. Sometimes going through progressions, especially as African Americans, we went through the Great Migration. And in the Great Migration, a lot of us didn't go to college. There's only 1 or 2 that went off. And when they went off, they never came back. They made something for themselves and they, did whatever they had to do from there. Through the years, I guess from those moments, well, hey, you know what? That's what the example. Send them off to school. send them off to school. You ain't gonna, man, look here. If you ain't going to school, you got to get out my house. You got to go get a job. You got to go do this if you ain't going to school. But sometimes when people, you know, who like come from no plan, want you to plan, you have no idea where you're going because no one has a vision.
Yeah, and then too, I'm glad you touched on the Great Migration. You know, you got all the folks coming from the rural South, coming up north to places like Detroit, Chicago, etc. And you got all these amazing manufacturing jobs where, you know, you may not even need a high school diploma, right? And you can make a really good living, work for 30 years, get a nice little pension. But then once those jobs went away, you know, you leave these communities kind of in shambles. So I can understand how, you know, the older generation is like, all right, I want to see you make it. And and I'm speaking from their perspective, in my mind, the only way you're going to do that is unless you go to college and get an education.
Right.
The unfortunate part of that is there's a financial component to that. And, you know, unless you get a scholarship, you know, athletic or academic or whatever the case may be, you leaving, you know, negative 50,000 like I did when I left college.
Woo, look, yeah. And I mean, that's real. And, you know, that's something that we really don't talk about. You know, that's a stressor within itself, because let's just say you're a person who didn't complete the 4-year degree and you do have this debt now. There is no return on investment. Okay. Now you're just really in debt. You really can't get to where you really want to be because, I mean, man, you have this looming over your head in the background, and that's, you know, those are just things, you know, we just really don't need. But those are situations for another time, brother.
Yeah.
We're about to move it on, okay? We're about to move it on. We are here to talk about you, okay? Now, my next question, you are a father, okay? You have 2 girls, correct?
2 daughters, yeah.
2 daughters. Now, I heard you talk about STEM programs, okay? And I've heard some of the comments you made, like, hey, there's no favoritism. I treat them just as if, you know, everybody else out there would treat them the same. You know, like I talk to them as if life would be talking to them almost. That's what I got from them. So my question to you is, in your mind, why do you feel it's very important to get girls into STEM programs?
Well, I think we got to break that mentality of, all right, the boys get the action figures and the girls get the, you know, the play set with the dolls and the play kitchen and all that stuff, right? You really have to treat them the same. My girls are 5 and 6, and they have a bunch of little architect building sets. They got, I mean, they've been playing with the little, you know, electric circuits for the past couple of years now. And of course, some of it is age appropriate. Some of it you really have to be there with them because they may not be old enough. But just for them to experience that and understand, oh, I have this little solar robot. When the sunlight hits it, it does something, right? And then that leads into the conversation of, oh, baby, look, on our roof, we have these solar panels. And guess what? Anytime you turn the TV on or whatever, that's powering this. So it really gets their mind going. But then the other reason is you need them in the room, right? When it comes to design and things like that, you have to have different perspective, and you need a female perspective. I truly believe that. It's no different than like having different ethnicities in a room of all industries, because it brings a different perspective.
True.
So I want my girls to be able to compete and, you know, with the best of them, and the best thing, and I know math, I know science, so I can really teach them what I know, right? So that's kind of how we roll in our household.
Okay, all right. So, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who are not familiar with any Marvel, he's over there with the Riri Ironhearts going on over there. He's over there building machines. They over there building their own like costumes. They over there being superheroes. He don't want to tell y'all that. I'm just gonna tell y'all. He got some magic over there in training. Okay, all right. Moving on though. All right, so we're going to talk about these articles. All right, now I've read these articles that you've written, and I want to dive into the first one. I want to talk about the first article, The Crust, 5 Years in Business. All right. You bring up great points in your article. Okay. Great points. One of the questions I want to ask you about that article is, in your opinion, in your mind, why is character key, very key in business, especially being an entrepreneur?
It's super important because, one, you have to be trustworthy. People have to be able to know that when you say you're going to do something, that you're going to make it happen. Mm-hmm. And two, just being kind to people. I posted about this a while ago, and I'll kind of give you the backstory as to why I posted it. We were living in the hills in Marietta, California, and wildfires are really prevalent out here. Yeah. Fire was coming over the hill. I'm actively packing things in the car, about ready to go, just in case the firefighters say, hey, you gotta go. Right. I have a client who's like, basically, I don't care. You need to come on out and you need to take care of my project. I'm like, no, I have, my family is always number one. So that really taught me a lesson that just because someone is a business owner doesn't mean that they're built the right way. I'll give you another example. When COVID first hit, we're working with an architect and they wanted us to go to the site. I'm like, I'm not endangering my employees by sending them to the site. So this was very early on, before they knew much about the virus. Sure. And he told my director of operations, he said, you guys are just using COVID as an excuse. And so these examples show that, like I said, just because you're a business owner doesn't mean that you know how to treat people. Sure. And that's super important, that you have a good foundation of being kind, being honest, always sticking to your word no matter what. And my employees can attest to this. I am a stickler about sticking to deadlines, and I don't care how big or small the task is, because anytime somebody comes to me, they're going to trust and believe that I'm going to provide them with a quality product on time. And so that's really big for me. And you get one thing I did find that was kind of surprising about business is that a lot of people who own businesses don't know what they're doing, and it's I guess I assumed if when I was an employee looking from the outside in, I just assumed that everybody had their ducks in a row, and it's not the case. I mean, people don't have their books together, they don't have contracts together, just the small little details that can get you in trouble.
So let me ask this question, and I don't want to veer off and to nothing too far left or whatever, but it's very interesting that you just said that. Mm-hmm. Now, I always ask this question, but I think this is a very appropriate time to ask this question, and I think you just hit it on it. But is that one of the main things people get misconstrued about having a business, that people think you have it all together?
Yeah, and I think social media is a big culprit behind that, because a lot of times, and that's why I named the article The Crust, right? Right. A lot of times people want the middle of the soft piece of the bread, but they don't pay attention to that outside part. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of struggle and strife when it comes to running a business. And I think on social media, a lot of times we portray ourselves in the most positive light as possible, and don't share kind of the negative sides of being a business owner. So right. I think that's why people have that misconception about business.
Okay. All right. No, because I just find it very interesting for you to give that perspective. And, you yourself being, a person in business, like, hey, I thought, that you had this in order and this, that, what have you. But as you said, when you first got started, you didn't have a background. You didn't go to school for, business or what have you. So everything you learned, you pretty much took the time, to sit and learn and write out your game plan and execute the game plan to where you need to be,
exactly.
But let's talk about this other article, How I Escaped My 9 to 5. I'm going to tell you why I like this article for a number of reasons. Okay. But one of the main reasons why I like this article we've all been there. Okay, some of us are there now. Like toggling. Especially I'm in education, so I can say I know educators who are toggling between going back to the classroom and trying to find something else to do with life, while we're like in this virtual hole or what have you. Mm-hmm. So you talked about a couple of things, all right? And I want to talk about these things. You talked about a couple of key points, but I want to focus on a few and their like importance. I want to talk about naysayers. I want to talk about ducks in a row, and I want to talk about network. Like, why are those three things I want to break down each one, but why are those three things very important when it comes to escaping the 9-to-5 hold and going into business for yourself or starting a new life or whatever?
Yeah, so anytime that you're doing something that a lot of people aren't doing, you're going to get questioned about it. When I told some family members, hey, I'm thinking about quitting my job to go start to run a business, they're like, why would you want to leave a good paying job to take a chance on this? So you really, I like Gary Vee's perspective on this. He's like, think about the worst case scenario, right? Are you gonna lose your house? Are you gonna, is your family gonna die, right? You think about these crazy worst case scenarios, and my worst case scenario was it doesn't work out, I'll go find a job. I not to sound cocky, but I had built up my portfolio of skill sets to the point where I was always getting calls by recruiters. So I knew that was kind of a fallback plan. So it didn't seem all that risky to me, but for someone who's not in business, it absolutely is risky. And then going into what you're saying about ducks in a row, we kind of touched on this. You really have to set a good foundation when you start a business. I mean, you obviously got to get your articles of incorporation. You got to get your EIN. You got to get your bank account. You got to figure out, contracts.
Now, see, wait a minute. Now, you know what? Okay, so let me just touch on something real quick. Social media, culprit number one, all right? So you already know I'm going with this, but when we're on social media, sometimes you see people, hey, get an LLC, invest this money in getting an LLC, but they never tell you what are the steps into making the LLC work, or what's the first step? It's always do this, invest this money in that. Well, how do I do it? How is this? But if you're not doing this, then you're, but you're talking about getting the ducks in a row. Man, the business behind the business that's behind the business. You hit it on it earlier, people not taking care of books and things of that nature. That's part of their business. And 9 times out of 10, if your company's going to go under, it's probably because your books are out of whack.
Yeah.
So, but I'm sorry, I digress.
No, that's all right.
Go right on, please.
And it's really important. These are not things that you can just kind of haphazardly do. I got myself in somewhat of trouble a couple of years ago. So I started Winston Engineering LLC almost 6 years ago. But then the engineering board came around and said, hey, in the state of California, you can't have an LLC as an architect, I believe as a lawyer or an engineer, just because you can't limit liability. So I had to go through, at this point, I had a ton of branding. I had, clothing, I had logos on the car, the whole thing, LLC. So these are things you really have to look into. And then I converted to INC, so we're an S Corp. But, you really got to pay attention. And then 2, I knew when I started this company, it was just me by myself. I knew I had to be efficient by myself. So I got things like electronic DocuSigns, right? So I can do things from my phone. I got an accounting service where I can do everything on my phone, send invoices, all that good stuff. I was in Mexico City probably about 4 years ago before I got employees. And I'm in the hotel before me and the wife are going out, writing a contract and sending it out to a client. I just knew efficiency has always been a big deal for me. And I think that comes from me coming from the government contracting background,
Mm-hmm.
which there are still a lot of inefficiencies in government, but you know, I still learned a lot from those jobs.
All right. And the last one, which I think is very important, but people, I just feel sometimes, for whatever reason, they just don't do it. Networking.
Yeah,
Like,
that's wild to me. When I find out people don't have like a LinkedIn, that is critical. Absolutely critical. Before I hire anybody, I'm looking on LinkedIn.
okay.
Before I do business with you, I'm looking on LinkedIn. I'll search other social media platforms as well, but you got to get yourself a decent digital footprint in this day and age, so that when people Google your name, you know, those items pop up. So like my networking, sometimes I can kind of go far with it, right? Just the other day, I'm watching the news, and in LA, there's this big pine tree, right? It's been in a ton of movies, decades. It's some kind of iconic pine tree. But an architect is building a custom home in that neighborhood. It used to be really run down, now it's getting gentrified. And I just look out the corner of my eye and I see the name of his company and his name. And I immediately get up from the dinner table, go write it in my phone and email it to myself. Then I go and I Google this guy, having a tough time finding him. I somehow stumble upon his Instagram. I DM him, comment on some one of his posts, saying, "Hey, I want to provide, you know, the HVAC, electrical, and plumbing engineering for your house."
Mm-hmm.
And then a day later, he hit me back and was like, "Oh, I'm gonna pass your information on to the developer." So when it comes to networking, for me, it's chess, not checkers. I join various organizations. I'm involved with, you know, Chamber of Commerce's. I make sure that I go to city events, like we have Coffee with the City, where the city talks about what's coming here. And if I hear, oh, I don't know, Target is thinking about coming here, I'm like, oh, well, what's the developer's contact?
Right.
You know, so these are the things that I'm constantly doing to see how can we get Winston Engineering out there and provide our services.
But see, now I'm sitting here and I'm listening to that, and I mean, it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense to me, because especially, you know, if you're providing services that you know for a fact, hey, you need these services to run any type of corporation or any type of business, you know.
Right.
Storefront, what have you, whatever, you need these services. So you're already on it, like you're already thinking about, okay, contact person here, this, then, oh, all right, this is coming. But for the person who's not like, and it's really not about hustle, but it's just really about, okay, what is it that you want? What's your end game? Because if the end game is just to be a business, all right, you're a business. Now what?
Yeah.
You know? So, you know, don't be out here, you know, whining and complaining that nothing's happening for you when, hey, you know, as a brand, you know, and you know this, very important, you have to market yourself as a brand. That's the first thing they see before they see anything. As you said, you saw the person's name on the side of, you know, some, you know, billboard or whatever. Oh, okay, that's the contractor, that's the person that's coming, man. But see, that's branding. So, man, I'm gonna go out here and look you up, whatever comes back to me. That's all part of branding. And I think that's one thing for sure that a lot of people really miss the steps on, you know. A lot of people I know are misbranded, you know, like, okay, you shouldn't have that for the type of services that you're providing. Like, I don't even see the connection here, but
yeah.
That's
just and in terms of, you know, networking, depending on what your service is, whether you're providing a professional service like myself or you're selling a product, you got to figure out who your consumer base is, and you got to use a sniper rifle and not a shotgun, right? Because when I first started, I was using a shotgun. I would go to an empty shopping center where it said commercial space available. I'd go print up a bunch of flyers of my services and stick it in the door, right? I didn't get not one call from that. So obviously it's going to be a lot of trial and error, but you know, you really got to hone in, and that helps you when it comes to doing Facebook or Instagram ads and things like that. So it helps you to save a ton of money. And also on SEO, right? Search engine optimization. So that when somebody Googles XYZ near me, you're on that first page.
Okay. Well, and hey, that's all part of, networking. And as you said, putting yourself in certain groups, so you can keep, ear to what's going on in, your neighborhood and maybe what's coming to your neighborhood or what have you. So, okay. All right. All right. Now, Mr. Winston, I've come to the part of my questioning where I have to put on this scarf here. All right. I ask this question. And for those of you who are wondering why am I putting on this scarf, the scarf says Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. For those of you who know already. But if you take a gander at my guest, and behind him, you will see a blue and white paddle on the wall with a Sigma sign. So this is to let you know that this is all about business and we're very serious. Okay. So I'm going to wear this scarf as I ask this question because I'm representing for the fraternity. And I don't want to hear any questions after that. I'm like, man, bro, how come you ain't what? Here you go. All right. There you go. All right. So we're going to talk about Phi Beta Sigma, okay? Before I ask this question, I want to ask this question. Why Sigma?
There's a few reasons that kind of attracted me to the organization. At Arizona State, it's a population of 3% Black folks, right? When I was there, you had 50,000 students and only 3% Black. And, you're drawn to folks that look like you, especially coming from where I come from. And I remember going to an open mic and one of my pro fights, shout out to Tone, he was at the open mic and I could immediately tell he was from the Midwest just by the way he walked, the way he talked. I think I told him this. He reminded me of those kids when you're taking the CTA, so the Chicago Transit Authority's the bus.
Yes.
And the kids in the back of the bus cracking jokes. It just brought me back to that. And I was immediately drawn into it. And one of the brothers kept inviting me out to stuff, not even trying to get me into the fraternity at that point. And I'm just around it. It's just a good energy, a good vibe of just nothing but just positive black men in a room. And I started doing my research and realizing that in almost every aspect of Black history, which is really American history, there's a Sigma involved, right? The March on Washington, the March on Washington, there was brothers involved with that, right? Brothers like A. Philip Randolph, who organized the Porters, just kind of on. And it really intrigued me, and it really struck a chord with me. And I've been in the frat since spring 2003. About next month or a couple of weeks, it'll be 18 years that I've been in the fraternity. So,
look here, say you an old dog now, man. They got you out now, man. Look here. Yeah. That's all right, man. Look here, man. Look, I don't even want to say, man. Yeah, I'm coming up on 30, okay, in 2023. Coming up on 30. So
that's amazing.
I can tell you, I just remember when it was 93. Like, I remember, hey, time flies. So that's all I got to say, man. Okay. But now let me get into my question. Thank you for answering that question. So, bro, I asked the question. Please let it go. Okay. All right. Now, my question to you is, what attribute did you already have within yourself that becoming a member of Phi Beta Sigma brought it to the forefront?
Probably discipline. I've always been disciplined, especially when it came to school. Ever since I was a little kid, I always aspired to do really well in school. When I was, when I got to high school and I started excelling in sports, I was very disciplined at, practicing ball in the backyard, right? I would come in from you know, when you get on varsity, your games are late. So I'd come in, it's still late at night. I would sit at that dining room table until I was done with my homework. So I've always been like that. And then once I joined the fraternity, we had a very small chapter at Arizona State. So, you know, they're looking around for different leadership, and I'm fresh off the sands, as they say. And I became president of the chapter, and I've always been somewhat shy. So it really forced me to kind of come out of my shell and be much more assertive, right? You have to, it really taught me how to be a leader. But no, definitely just being disciplined really brought that out. And, you know, it's something to say when you're in a room, especially the older brothers, and they're in three-piece suits, and you have no dress clothes, and you're like, oh, this is how you're supposed to do it. Mm-hmm. So a lot of lessons learned that I still, you know, that are still applied to my business now.
Okay. First and foremost, man, shout out to the older bros, man. Go mob, okay?
Go mob.
Shout out to because you know it's very profound. You even say that, you know, because I remember, man, fresh off the sands, man. Hey, party, but you know when it's time to take care of business, how you show up, to take care of that business, it makes a huge difference in how that business gets done. And I
mean, even having an agenda at a meeting, right? Something written down where, you know, you're following something.
I'm gonna tell you, man. Look, I'm gonna tell you, man. So I'm gonna take it a step further to see how a meeting is really ran. Blew my mind. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, there are certain things that you will see on TV or whatever, you know, like, oh, okay, this is how you run a meeting. No, that's not. Don't get what you see on TV and what we do in real life, you know, confused. You know, like I know there's stuff you see on, this is how you have to make this type of motion for whatever it is that's going on. And then that has to be second. And then that has to come from this. And, you know, you have to have all these, you know, dynamics in place before one thing is agreed upon. So if there's one thing it taught, man, like it really taught me, you know, law and how to be civil, you know, under that, you know. So,
Robert's Rules of Order, yep.
There you go. You said it, I didn't say it, he just told you what it was. All right, okay. So, Matt, look, I am enjoying myself, man. This is man. I was looking forward to this conversation. Now that we're having this conversation, I'm really enjoying this conversation. Unfortunately, I have to ask the last question because that's the question that my show is known for. And I have to ask. So, Mr. Anthony Winston III, what is the one word that best describes you and why?
I'll probably say dynamic. Because, you know, I've gone through a lot of different changes over my life to get me to this point. Mm-hmm. Tons of adversity, tons of ups and downs, but I always figure out a way to make it work. For me, there's always an answer to every single question. You just got to find it. Some of those answers are hard, some are easy, but I would say dynamic because, you know, me and my buddies talk about this. The things that we've experienced, if we went broke today, we would figure out how to get back. And, you know, that comes from me taking lumps in businesses. Like I've had some businesses fail and taking those lessons learned. Like if you take a $20,000 loss in a business, don't think of it as a loss. You just learned a $20,000 lesson that could potentially be $1 million lesson in the future.
Okay. All right. I like that. I'm gonna add a word to it. Visionary. And I'm gonna tell you why. Because at the end of the day, you still have to have a vision. Despite all the lumps you're going to take, you still know how you want it to look in the end.
Yeah.
All right. Sometimes you have to have your vision hammered into place because it's so wide. Mm-hmm. You need to narrow it down. Okay, yeah, all right, this is how it is. Because sometimes, man, we can be thinking, hey, way outside the box. Let's hammer it down and bring it in, and let's be on this clear path to connect so all these other things come into play. So now, man, as you said, dynamic, visionary dynamic, you know. So now these things are coming into play, and it's becoming what I wanted it to be in the beginning. Yeah. Voltron, there you go. Okay, Wu-Tang, there we go. All right, everybody. You see how it all comes together at the end, man. Look here, boy. Look.
Yeah.
All right. If people want to get in contact with you, how can people get in contact with you?
Yeah, check us out, winstoneng.com. You can follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Everything is Winston Engineering. If you want to find my personal LinkedIn, it's just search Anthony Winston III, and you know, I'll hit you back. If you're going to hit me up about business, potentially starting a business, make sure you're serious about it. Don't waste my time, because I'll devote my time to helping you get to where you want to be, but you just need to be serious about it.
Yeah. Look here, truer words have never been spoken. Please don't waste a man's time. He's about the business. So if you're really legit about the business, hit him up. If not, keep it moving. Trust me, it will be okay. We're big people, all right? We will live to see tomorrow, and you'll be okay too. There you go. All right. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, this is Word with Ty Brownlow. I'm Ty Brownlow. Remember, no one is worthless. No story is worthless. You can catch me on all social media platforms at Word with Ty Brownlow, or you can just go to my website, tybrownlow.com, get this wonderful interview, plus other great interviews. And you can also catch me on the podcast platform of Apple, Anchor, and Google at Word with Ty Brownlow. Man, look here. Mr. Anthony Winston III, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your words. I appreciate you, man, dropping that knowledge on us today. Man, I would love for you to come back to the show. Yes,
absolutely.
Something else, or you got something else going on, man, please hit us up, because we would love to have you.
I got some more stuff cooking, so I'll definitely let you know.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we out. Peace.